Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, PAC12, ACC, and everything in between.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Ryan Lee. I'm going to be your host for today, and I hope you once again, you're staying safe amongst the pandemic. We have an absolutely amazing show for you, including the fact that we have another top challenger coming back into the fold, including some updates regarding the pandemic, how a new conference shakes that up as well as my top picks of the week for Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is. That's all coming up. But first, let's have a little bit of a celebration. You know, even though the pandemic is going around for a little bit now, there's seemingly not very much to really celebrate. Kind of a meager time right now with all the stuff going on. There's a whole lot going on. However, especially for people in the West Coast, and especially for people who live in the southwest part of the United States, congratulations to the Pac-12. Welcome to the party. The party known as the NCAA sweepstakes and some of the craziness that comes along with it, including the fact that they're essentially starting over from scratch. Yes, there are a grand total of 12 teams being played this weekend. Initially, before two of them actually got canceled, I will get into those in a little bit. But the fact that the Pac-12 is back is actually kind of huge for the sake of college football. The Pac-12 is a very interesting division. Because the thing is that even if the programs themselves might not be A+, the Pac-12 itself most certainly produces a lot of A+ talent. Especially from these colleges, UCLA, Stanford, USC, Cal Berkeley, Oregon. Some of these schools are very successful at, bringing up prospects. Being able to train, coach, and develop all of these people who want nothing more than a shot at the NFL. The Pac-12 is arguably my favorite conference in all of college football. I love a lot of the programs that come from the Pac-12. A lot of them have a long, rich history. A lot of them have players I absolutely love. However, starting late is never exactly the easiest thing in the world to do. Because the goal for every single team is not simply to win their conference. It's not simply to win one game. It is to win every single game or as many of them as possible. And for those top programs, losing is not acceptable. In those last 2, 3, 4 games to the very end, they're not acceptable. Clemson doesn't find them acceptable. Alabama sure doesn't. I'd say the Pac-12 actually brings just as big of a punch, if not even bigger punch, to when the Big Ten was there. Because the thing about the Big Ten is that a lot of the teams there, some of them, they kind of needed their football back. I'm sure Indiana wasn't too crazy about it. I'm sure University of Minnesota, something to look forward to other than the Vikings. A lot of Michiganders trying to sport either their green or their blue because the Lions, who knows how they're going to be. And a lot of these schools, the thing about what they provide is not just the fact that they play football, but it also provides the fact that a lot of these schools and a lot of these programs, they help these areas provide something that is other than the circumstances of the world right now. It really was the reason why, for example, back in 2005, 2006, The New Orleans Saints were so important to the Louisiana area because they were hit so hard by Hurricane Katrina. Like, literally, you know it, one of the most iconic moments in all of sports was the first game back in the Superdome on Monday Night Football. In one of the first drives of the game, the Saints blocked a punt and returned it for a touchdown. It gave that city hope. It gave them something to believe in. Some optimism. You also saw the same thing in 2017. Houston was hit really hard by Hurricane Harvey. And then next thing you know, J.J. Watt of the Houston Texans starts that GoFundMe with the goal of a few $100,000 and ended up raising tens of millions instead. For these areas like the Pac-12, for these areas like the Big Ten, it's not just a distraction. It's not just sports. It's hope. It's optimism. It's the sense that with all the craziness going on in the world, pandemic, election, unemployment being so high, people need this. There's been wildfires going around in the Southern California area for weeks now. I'm sure a lot of people who live in the LA area, maybe some of those people are not just Rams fans, or not just Chargers fans. Maybe they love USC or UCLA or whomever. And they just want that extra bit of something to give them a little bit of optimism, that distraction, so they don't have to worry about what's going on in the world just for 3 hours a week. Nothing crazy. Because sports are a powerful tool. They really are. And sometimes people are just like, oh, it's just a game. Or, oh, it's just a sport. It's so much greater than that. And people, a lot of times, do not realize it. That's why bringing the Pac-12 back. That's why bringing the Big Ten back. The Mountain West, the MAC, the whoever. That's why those were such a big deal. Like, who does Oregon have? The Trailblazers and the NBA season's already over. Who does Oregon have? They have their football. I could say the same thing about Utah. Who do they have? Utah Jazz, the NBA season once again already ended. They've got the football team. It's a very powerful and unappreciated tool, sports is. That's why everyone was pushing so hard to bring it back. That's why, despite all the hesitation and all of the negativity going on, bringing these sports back was so important to them. Unfortunately, two of the top matchups of the week, they're just going to have to wait a little bit longer. The Arizona Wildcats and the Utah Utes, everyone on those two programs, they're going to have to push back a little bit. Utah found multiple positive tests, according to ESPN's Cal Benagura. There's no exact number. It just says a group. And the same thing happened between the Washington Huskies and the California Golden Bears. Someone from Cal tested positive, along with multiple people potentially linked to contact tracing. I don't like having to report on all the cancellations that goes on. I'd rather talk about the amazing things about these sports. Whatever sport it is. But these are the circumstances of the world right now. But it's okay because Cal might still be able to play their game next week against Arizona State, potentially. Washington still has a shot to play against Oregon State. Utah could potentially get well enough to play UCLA. We don't know yet. And Arizona, it's on to SC. But once again, we got a long season to go. 7 games of all Pac-12 action. And I'm going to be super excited to see it all with the return of the Pac-12. Now, we are going to be moving on to our next segment, one of my personal favorites, Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is, where I'm going to teach you that little nugget to make yourself just slightly better when it comes to your betting repertoire, as well as my top picks, my top 3 games of the week. And a little teaser for you, it might be everyone's top 3 games of the week. Stick around.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Back here once again here on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Once again, Ryan Lee here. We just talked about the return of the Pac-12. Not only what it meant to the landscape of college football, but what it means to the entire nation. And now we're going to be going into one of my favorite segments, Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is. And what we do is we talk about all things sports betting, including my picks for the best bets of the week, which essentially serve as my predictions of the week. But before I get into that, let me teach you a quick little nugget about sports betting and how it works. So, everything that we've done up to this point has kind of built itself up. We've talked about what the spread is. We've talked about the parlay. We've talked about the over-unders. We've talked about prop betting. We've talked about how to read the American system of numbers, which is essentially like 95% of everything. But in sports betting and sports gambling, you can actually change the way that you read the odds. And this is actually the way that I started out when I was a brand new bettor, which was the fractional system. Now, what exactly is the fractional system? Well, if you remember when I was describing how to read an odds format, a lot of times you see a number underneath. A lot of times when you go betting, you see a little number. It's going to be something like minus something. You know, if you have for example, I'm looking at one of the websites that I most know of. Right now it has SMU minus 18 over Temple, and the odds currently are minus 110, which means you have to pay in $110 to get $100, and then the rest of it kind of works itself on the same ratio. But the fractional system, to me, for someone who's brand new, I would highly suggest this one instead of the American system. Because the American system of reading odds formats is a little bit tricky and a little complex for someone who does not understand it. So if you're brand new, I would highly recommend the fractional system. What it does, it takes that same number, like the minus 100 or plus 250, whatever it is. It turns that number into a fraction. Now, the thing about betting is that if there's an obvious favorite, what they do is they make that odds winning ratio a lot smaller. And if there's an event that's less likely to happen, they make that winning ratio bigger. Because they don't want to reward you so much for an outcome that was most likely going to happen. They want to reward you for taking chances. And they still reward you for picking the most obvious outcome. It's just not nearly as much. Like, for whatever reason, say you wanted to pick USC to win the national championship, and miraculously they do, you're going to win a lot of money. Because the probability of that happening right now is not that great. But if you were to pick, let's say, Clemson to win the national championship, well, then you're going to be rewarded still, just not nearly as great. Because it was probably the most likeliest of outcomes. So this goes into the fractional system but the thing is that the reason why that transitions nicely into the fractional system is because everything's layered in a format. Let's pick another game from throughout the week. Let's pick Arizona State and USC to be exact. It's minus 110 for the spread, whether you pick USC minus 11 or Arizona State plus 11. The entire way it is minus 110. However, if you switch it to the fractional system, it switches itself to 10 over 11, which means that is the ratio of your betting that you're going to get back. Say, for example, if the odds are 4 out of 5. You're not going to put in $50 and only get 40 back. You get 50 plus the 40, so you get 90. And it actually works the same with the money line. The smaller the fraction, it means that's the favorite. The bigger the fraction, that means they're an underdog. I'll stick with the Arizona State USC example. USC currently at the money line is 6 over 25. Arizona State is currently 63 over 20. It means USC is a very heavy favorite. And if you were to bet $25 on USC to win the game, you're only going to get $31. Because 25 plus 6. I personally think the fractional system makes more sense to someone who's new. Because all you have to think about is, it's easier to understand to me. The smaller the fraction, the higher probability. And the more likely outcome, that means you're the favorite. The bigger the fraction, the less likely the possibility, that means you're the underdog. I'll give you another great example. Memphis is playing against Florida. Memphis is favored by 17. However, the money line kind of skews it a lot. It has South Florida as 107 over 20. And it has Memphis as 13 over 100. This suggests that they're saying that Memphis is going to be a heavy favorite. And for someone who's brand new, I would highly suggest the fractional system. It just makes more sense. That was our little nugget about how to read some odds. Now let's get into the games. So now here's the thing about the games of this week. I had so many to choose from. And I had to narrow it down to 3. I want to choose these 3 for the simple reason of they're all top 25 versus top 25 matchups. One's a top 10 matchup, and one's a top 5 matchup. One of the games I decided is a potential chance at a potential national championship preview. And if not, at least a potential preview of what could be either the Rose Bowl or the Sugar Bowl. The first game we'll be talking about is actually two of the best teams in what's arguably my favorite conference. 1-1 versus 2-0. Number 23 over number 13. However, this situation is going to be a little bit interesting. Both teams had a week off last week. And both teams are very well known for their very high-flying offenses. In Michigan and in Indiana. Currently, they both have 36.5 points on offense. Michigan's been scoring 25 against on defense. Indiana's got 28 against. Michigan's been very productive on the offensive side of the ball, 466 yards on average, versus Indiana's 279. Defense, they both struggle a little bit in terms of yardage. 387 to 367. Michigan had that upset loss to Michigan State a couple weeks ago. But everything that has been shown so far seems to not necessarily be super indicative of that. Because Vegas has Michigan at minus 3.5. ESPN's win probability meter has Indiana at 57%. Only about 260 yards on average. But at the same time, the rushing attack is what's really been the benefactor for Jim Harbaugh so far. 204 yards is an insane number. And it's highlighted by Hassan Haskins. He has 3 touchdowns already in 2 games. 130 yards. And he's averaging 70 plus and a touchdown per game. It's the way that Jim Harbaugh has run offenses before. Throw it back to when Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick, Frank Gore's potent running attack, Alex Smith's ability to run a little bit, and Colin Kaepernick's ability to run. This is what Jim Harbaugh does best, is run the ball. The thing is that Indiana's running attack could potentially match up with Stevie Scott. He's also got 2 touchdowns and 138 yards. However, there's a big difference here. It's that Michael Penix, in 2 games so far, he's shown to be a little more of a pocket passer. Nothing crazy, when it comes to his feet. I would say the number one thing to look for in this specific matchup, I'm honestly going to say it, it's going to be Michigan's, strangely enough, their defense versus Indiana's offense. Because from what I have seen on the film, Indiana's defense struggles. But the thing about Indiana is that they know how to do 2 things. They're really good situationally. They know how to game plan. And they know how to make you uncomfortable enough to maybe make that slightly wrong decision. However, one of the things I like to look at is trends. And you know what one of the biggest trends is? Ever since Jim Harbaugh has taken over as coach, he has had Tom Allen's number. 2016, Michigan won by 10. 2017, they won by 7. 2018, they won by 11. In 2019, they won by 25. Those last 2 games, those games all came in the Jim Harbaugh and Tom Allen era for Indiana and Michigan, respectively. I've seen Michigan play. I've seen Indiana play as well. They both have so much potential to do amazing things. They both have their various strengths and weaknesses. The Wolverines can just move the ball up and down the field. The Hoosiers might not be able to do that as well. But the thing they know how to do is exploit mistakes. Not necessarily force them, but how to make the most of them. Indiana so far on defense has gotten 5 interceptions in 2 games so far. And the cool thing is they can even get good pressure on the quarterback. They've got about 5 sacks in 2 games so far, which is really good actually. But here's the biggest thing that concerns me. Indiana is in the bottom 5 of the top 10, which is 14 teams. They only have 18 first downs on average per game. That is 1 more than the lowest, who's at 17, their conference. First downs allowed, they're at 23. The most at 28. And the thing about Indiana that concerns me just as much, they're only converting on 26% of their third downs. Michigan's at 44. So if there's one thing that Jim Harbaugh can really do is exploit the situational football. Exploit the fact that Indiana struggles getting first downs. Exploit the fact that they're not a good third down team. And because of the situational football, and because I know the past history as well, and I've seen Jim Harbaugh operate not only in Michigan but in San Francisco as well, it's why I'm going to take Michigan minus 3.5. I just think it makes sense. Yes, Indiana's higher ranked, but at the same time, if anybody can game plan around that, it's Jim Harbaugh. And he probably knows exactly how to adjust after losing to Michigan State. The next game I'm going to focus on is a big matchup for the week. It is two top 10 teams. It's a fight of gladiators going at each other. The number 8 Florida Gators, who are currently 3-1, versus the University of Georgia Bulldogs, sitting at 4-1. Now, this game is going to be a very interesting one. Once again, because instead of having two teams who are most likely going to shoot out because they both have strengths on offense, this is a game where one team has a massive upside on offense, but the other team's defense might have what it takes to stop them. Florida is sitting at 42 points against per game. Florida is sitting at 42 points scored per game, which is a lot in the NCAA. The thing is that in defense, they're allowing 29. Georgia's offense is only scoring 29. But the thing is that Georgia's defense is allowing only 16. Their offenses are very similar, 476 yards versus 404. Defenses are very similar as well. Defenses are a little lopsided, 433 versus 300 yards. Florida's coming off a win against Mizzou, and Georgia's coming off a win against Kentucky. Now the thing is, Kirby Smart's been tested once already. And the thing is, in the first half, it looked like he was doing everything right. It looked like it was going to be a shootout. It was going to be a very tight game. Who knows where it was going to go? And then little by little by little, Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide kept chunking away at the lead. And then they took over the game. Here's the thing about these teams. They're both really good at getting pressure on the quarterback. Florida's sitting at 11 sacks, and that is through 4 games, so they're averaging close to 3. And with 5 games under the belt, Georgia's currently leading the conference with 17. That means they're also averaging a little over 3 sacks a game as well. Simply put, what that means, they're getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They're able to force them to make quick decisions. Make them decide in the moment. They either got to throw it or they got to get hit. And the thing is, both of these quarterbacks, both Stetson Bennett and Kyle Trask, they're going to have a little bit of a task. Because these two secondaries have been really good at disrupting the pass. Causing pressure. They are getting their hands on balls before they get there. It's a lot. However, the thing about these two teams is that Florida already had their task. The first tough task was against Texas A&M. But the thing is that they couldn't keep a hold on the key matchup of the game, which to me is going to be Kyle Trask versus the Georgia secondary. 476 yards for the Florida offense, 300 yards allowed against the Georgia defense. 342 yards for Kyle Trask, 220 against the Georgia secondary. 80 yards on the ground allowed by Georgia. 133 gained by Florida. I expect this to be a very close game. I am literally expecting this one to maybe come down to the last play. Probably a field goal, to be honest. But here is where I'm torn. Currently the line sits at -3 in favor of Georgia. Because the thing is that Georgia's defense has been tested before. Alabama was the number one offense in the country. What did they do? They gave up 41 points. But they know what to expect. That's the thing. And ever since Dan Mullen's taken over, both in 2018 and 2017, when these two teams have matched up, Kirby Smart has had the advantage. 2018 he won by 17, 2019 he won by 7. I want to pick Georgia. I do. Everything to me leans Georgia. Because their defense definitely shut down Mac Jones and the Crimson Tide offense for at least the first half. But can they adjust? Honestly, I think they can. But the thing is, if this one comes out as a loss, I won't be surprised either. I think we'll stick with my gut and say Georgia -3 is going to be the way it goes. It's probably going to be something like 3 or 4. Something really close like that. I might even get a tie from that, to be honest. I wouldn't doubt that. But yeah, my guts tell me Georgia -3.5. Because my guts tell me Georgia -3. Even though Florida's such a high-powered offense, I have a feeling that Kirby Smart's going to learn from what he did versus Alabama. Or guess what he couldn't do versus Alabama. The final matchup for this set of games, to me, I don't know what to make of this last matchup. I really don't. The biggest thing about this matchup is the fact that Trevor Lawrence is still out. He's still not playing. This is all on DJ Oyunlade, their backup, who I watched his film from the Boston College game and he looks solid. So here's Oyunlade versus Boston College. 30 for 41, 342 yards, and a pair of touchdowns in the air. He rushed for 25 yards and 1 touchdown, which isn't bad by any means. I'd say it's actually pretty solid for a first start. Now, here's where things get a little interesting. Oyunlade once again has only played through 1 game. 340 yards. Clemson's still averaging 46 points on offense. Notre Dame is not that far behind at 34. However, these defenses are going to be the big story here. Clemson's allowing 15 points a game. Notre Dame's allowing 10. Now, one of the things I really enjoyed talking about is who have these teams played? Have they gotten tested yet? Clemson has. They played Miami when they were number 7 in the country. 42-17 to be exact. I'm looking through Notre Dame's schedule. I don't know if anyone really gave them a really big of a fight. Maybe Louisville. And they're not even, I don't think, been in the top 25 once all year. And if they were, I believe they were in the 20s and unders. These offenses and these defenses compare very nicely. 508 yards for Clemson, 437 for Notre Dame. In defense, 274 yards for Clemson, 267 yards for Notre Dame. I'm going to say this. I believe I already know what my biggest matchup is going to be, and it's going to be how is Clemson's defense. It's how Notre Dame's defense can contain Travis Etienne. That's it. Because the thing about Clemson is that Etienne is not only a weapon in the backfield as a running back, but he's very shifty. He's very good at catching the ball as well. I honestly think my first impression of him was Le'Veon Bell, but in terms of the shiftiness, the ability to catch the ball and stuff like that. Because right now, Clemson's averaging on the ground 166 yards a game. Notre Dame's only allowing 97. Because the thing is that almost every single stat across the board, for the most part, kind of cancels out one way or another. The thing with both these teams is that they can get great pressure on the quarterback. They're both sitting at 11 sacks each. The thing is that both teams are really good at not allowing pressure to happen in the first place. They both have only allowed 11 sacks. But the thing is that Clemson is very good at getting to the quarterback immediately. 28 sacks so far. They're averaging 4 a game. Notre Dame, not terribly shabby. They're averaging about 3 a game. 17 in 6 games. That's not bad, actually. However, one of the biggest things is that not only is Clemson good at converting, they're also good at stopping. And so is Notre Dame. 26 first downs a game versus 24.5. 13 first downs allowed versus 14 first downs allowed. ACC in terms of opponent first down percentage. And you know what they both are as well? Number 1 and number 2 in third down percentage and opponent third down percentage. Notre Dame converts 54%. Clemson converts 50% on third down. Notre Dame only allows their opponent to convert 24% of the time on third down. Clemson does 27% of the time. This is going to be a preview to most likely either the Sugar Bowl or the Rose Bowl. But the thing is, it's also Notre Dame's first big test. I can see Notre Dame giving Clemson problems. But here's where my biggest issue lies. The line is 5.5. And here's where I struggle. Because is 5.5 just a little too much? If it was 4, I would 100% take Clemson minus 4. If it was 6 or 7, I'd be iffy on it too. I might have taken Notre Dame plus 6 or plus 7. But 5.5 is a very tricky number. Can Clemson win by a touchdown or more? The question is that, is DJ Oyangale able to push past all of that stuff? Everything he was able to do. Because he was the number 1 pocket QB in the entire recruiting class. And according to a quote by Dabo Swinney, which they put on the broadcast for ESPN when he made his first start against Boston College, quote, "There were times during camp DJ made Trevor look normal," which means DJ looked exceptional. This is going to be his first big test. And from what I saw against Boston College, he may struggle. It's the pressures of being a true freshman. Ian Book has seen a lot of it. A lot of what he's done has been there, done that. He's a senior this year. He's most likely fighting for his career. I've seen Clemson operate. It's something to be bestowed upon. But the question is it going to be enough with the backup quarterback? I personally think it is. And I'm going to say Clemson minus 5.5 can do. That's been it for today. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening. Make sure to leave us a review and make sure to leave your opinions and thoughts inside of the comments. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to check us out again on Wednesday when we go over how these matchups went. For all of us here at the GSMC Podcast Network, I'm Ryan Lee. I hope you have a great rest of your night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.